The stage was set before Kash Patel even walked on. The screens behind the host flashed bold headlines: whistleblower or fabricator, the man behind the mayhem. The crowd had been warmed up with a montage, clips of Kash's past appearances, paired with dramatic music and skeptical commentary. The host, Delaney Cross, sharp-tongued, camera-ready and hungry for viral moments, smiled as the lights dimmed and the segment's intro rolled. "Tonight," she began, her voice like velvet over ice, "we're joined by Kash Patel, a man often described as a national security insider, a provocateur, and, more frequently these days, a conspiracy theorist." A ripple of laughter from the studio audience. Kash, seated opposite her in the steel-grey guest chair, didn't blink. He leaned forward, rested his elbows on the table, and looked her dead in the eye. "You can call me whatever you want," he said quietly, "but I brought the receipts." Delaney's smile didn't move, but the glint in her eye shifted, just slightly. She had expected deflection, denial, maybe even a little outrage. What she hadn't expected was for Kash to reach into his coat pocket and pull out a flash drive marked Declassified, 04-12-24 in military-style lettering. The cameras zoomed in. The internet already knew. This moment wasn't going to stay in the studio. This moment was going to break it. Kash Patel held the flash drive between his fingers like a grenade with the pin already pulled. Delaney Cross hesitated just long enough for her producer's voice to buzz frantically into her earpiece. "Tell him we can't air classified content. Cut to break if needed." But it was too late. The audience could feel it. Kash didn't wait for permission. He looked toward the production booth, made eye contact with a stunned technician behind the glass, and asked calmly, "Do you have the courage to click play, or are we pretending this is still journalism?" A beat of silence. Then, almost involuntarily, the tech plugged the flash drive into the control laptop. The first file was labeled .exumsom Ravenwind Red 12s 923. MP4, it opened with a timestamp, a blurred Pentagon logo and a voice, clear, direct, and unmistakably belonging to a high-ranking intelligence official. This operation was never supposed to surface. If the American people knew what we were doing on domestic soil... Delaney slammed her palm on the table. "Stop the footage," she barked. "We cannot verify that. We can't." But Kash had leaned back, arms crossed, eyes locked on her like a man who just called checkmate with half the pieces still on the board. "That voice? He briefed you 2 weeks ago," Kash said. "You ran the talking points. Now you're pretending not to recognize him?" The clip played on. Just seconds, but enough. It showed names, blacked out lines, a document header with the phrase Directive Authority Domestic Psychological Shaping Ops, and one word in bold, Declassified. Delaney's face went pale. The crowd didn't breathe. Then came the moment that would go viral. Kash turned to her, calmly placed the flash drive back into his pocket and said, "You called me a conspiracy theorist. I just showed your audience what your network signed an NDA to hide." Silence. No cue cards. No scripted comeback. Just real-time panic and a flood of viewers online realizing this wasn't a debate. It was a reveal. The studio lights flickered. It wasn't a glitch. It was an order. From the control room came a rapid-fire flurry of commands. Kill the feed. Cut to commercial. Dump the last 10 seconds. The network had protocols for moments like this, but they were built for gaffes, for slip-ups, not for declassified intelligence aired in front of a live audience. Delaney Cross reached for her tablet, stalling. Her producers scrambled off camera. The screen behind her, which had been flashing live one-on-one with Kash Patel, suddenly went black. The audience gasped. Then, without warning, the entire show cut to a commercial. A generic pharmaceutical ad with cheerful music and smiling actors. But inside the studio, chaos. "You can't air that without a legal review," Delaney snapped. "I just did," Kash replied, standing now, calm, centered, unmoved. "That file was cleared through the correct channels. Your show just censored it, not for legality, but because you didn't like what it proved." Someone in the crew whispered, "We're still hot," realizing that though the national feed had cut, the live stream, the secondary, unedited stream running on the network's website, was still rolling. And within seconds, people across the country realized the cable feed was dead. The online feed was raw. Social media caught fire. They cut the feed, Kash leaks declassified on live TV. Clips of the footage, screen recorded before it disappeared, exploded across TikTok, X, and Telegram. One comment read, "They tried to cut the story, but they didn't realize the story had already escaped." Meanwhile, Delaney's earpiece was silent. She looked up at Kash, who now stood center frame, no script, no mic, just truth too big to be buried. This wasn't about politics, he said, to the camera still streaming. It was about accountability. And now that America's seen it, let's see who's still pretending they didn't. It didn't take long. Just 30 minutes after the live segment went dark, Skycast News posted a statement on all official channels. The tone was corporate, calculated, and soaked in plausible deniability. Tonight's segment featuring Mr. Kash Patel was interrupted due to a breach in editorial protocol. The information shared was not vetted by our legal or standards teams and may contain sensitive or misleading content. We are reviewing the matter internally and will update our viewers as more information becomes available. But by then, Kash Patel had already gone live. From a hotel room just blocks from the studio, Kash launched a stream on X, YouTube, and Rumble simultaneously. The same flash drive, the same files, and now the same statement. Only this time, he read it out loud. Holding up his phone to the camera, Kash leaned in, voice calm, slow, and razor-sharp. "The network says I shared information that may be misleading, but the documents were marked declassified. Here's the clearance log." He flipped the screen to show an official, time-stamped document bearing the seal of the Department of Defense and the Freedom of Information Act approval code. Then he held up the network's PR statement and added, "Here's what they didn't tell you. The host saw the same documents during pre-show prep. They planned the takedown, and when I turned the lights on, they ran." Over 2-3 million people watched the stream live. Another 12 million viewed it in the next 24 hours. Comment sections were a battleground, but a clear pattern emerged. Even if half of it's true, it's still more than we've been told in years. They labelled him a conspiracy theorist. Then he brought the proof, and they pulled the plug. Kash ended the stream with one final line. "This wasn't about proving I'm right. It was about proving they're afraid of you knowing what I know." And with that, he unplugged the flash drive. Fade to black. Capitol Hill woke up shaken. What had started as a primetime ambush turned into a constitutional brushfire. By dawn, the story wasn't about Kash Patel. It was about the documents. Cable outlets tried to pivot. Some called the files unverified, others recklessly released. But the problem? Too many high-level officials weren't denying the content. They were avoiding it. That morning, 3 senators, 2 Republicans, 1 Democrat, held an unscheduled press conference on the Capitol steps. They didn't name Kash Patel directly, but they didn't have to. If declassified materials are being hidden from the public under the pretense of narrative stability, then this body has an obligation to investigate, said Senator Hayes, visibly tense. Reporters pounced. One asked, "Are you confirming the intel aired by Patel was legitimate?" The senator didn't blink. "I'm confirming it exists." That quote? Headlined by noon. Meanwhile, inside a quiet DC apartment, Kash Patel's phone buzzed. It was a direct line from the House Oversight Committee. "Mr. Patel, we're requesting your presence for a classified preliminary review. Today." He didn't ask which party sent it. He already knew truth isn't partisan. But exposure makes everyone sweat. Kash packed his bag, the flash drive, the printed clearance logs, a fresh sealed copy of the document labelled Directive Authority Domestic Shaping Ops. Before he left, he went live again. Just 60 seconds. "I've just been called to Congress. They want to see what you saw. But don't worry, I'm not going to tell them anything I didn't already tell you first." It wasn't a hearing, not officially. It was an emergency classified review session. Translation: we need to see what he has before the public sees any more. 10 lawmakers, 2 intelligence liaisons, no cameras, no transcripts, just a long walnut table lined with the most powerful people in Washington, waiting for a man they'd long dismissed as fringe. The door closed, the clock ticked. Then it began. Kash Patel walked in carrying a secure case. No entourage, no notes. He set the case on the table, opened it and placed 5 manila folders before the committee. "These are copies of what I released, and a few you haven't seen yet." A congresswoman raised a brow. "You're assuming we didn't already have these?" Kash replied without blinking. "If you had them, you wouldn't be in this room with me. You'd be explaining them to the American people." Silence. He began with the document titled Operation Ravenwind, a domestic behavioral tracking initiative greenlit during an emergency directive in 2021, supposedly sunsetted. Only it wasn't. The files included renewal orders, funding trails, internal warnings from whistleblowers that the data collection had exceeded its lawful scope by 312%. One congressman looked physically ill. Another whispered to their aide, "We were briefed this ended." Kash waited, let it sink in, then dropped the final card. "Your offices weren't briefed because the agency marked this as a compartmentalized retention zone. Only 5 people in this country had full clearance." He flipped a page and pointed to a name. The room froze. Because the name wasn't an agency head, it was a sitting senator. That moment? Never aired, never recorded. But by evening, 3 lawmakers had leaked this phrase to the press. It's not that Kash Patel had the truth, it's that he had the receipts. Delaney Cross wasn't used to being off-script. Her empire was built on polish, precision, and control, especially control. But now, she was the face of the broadcast that tried to cut a truth it couldn't contain. And the backlash was relentless. 3 million comments across platforms, thousands of think pieces, hashtags like "play the file," "Kash was right," and "truth interrupted" flooded every corner of the internet. Finally, she responded. In a pre-recorded, carefully worded monologue aired at the top of her show, she said, "There are protocols for a reason. When a guest circumvents editorial review and shows unvetted material, we have to act responsibly. That's not censorship. That's structure." She tried to move on, change the topic, pivot to a political pole. But it didn't work. Because while she was trying to shift the narrative, Kash Patel had already moved it forward. Live from a secure press facility in Virginia, he hosted his own stream, watched by 6.5 million people in real time. And this time he wasn't showing files. He was showing connections. What Delaney called unvetted was reviewed by the DoD, cleared by FOIA, and marked eligible for public release under National Security Exemption Revision B12. He held up the legal notice, highlighted, signed. What she didn't want aired wasn't a theory. It was a truth that made her show and every institution behind it look complicit in keeping Americans uninformed. Then came the mic drop moment. He pulled out the NDA. "This is the non-disclosure agreement between Skycast News and a defense subcontractor involved in Operation Ravenwind. Delaney's legal team signed it 6 months ago. She knew." The chat exploded. She knew. NDAs don't lie. This just went nuclear. Kash didn't gloat. He didn't even smirk. "I'm not here to ruin reputations. I'm here to restore yours, the public's, the people who deserve to know what's being done in your name, with your money and without your consent." And with that he ended the stream. Not with a shout, not with a whisper, but with clarity. It started with a single tweet, no profile picture, no bio, just a username, @RavenOp27. I was part of it. Kash Patel isn't speculating, he's underplaying it. At first, it looked like a troll, but in under an hour, major investigative journalists, digital forensics analysts, and former Intel contractors verified metadata, location logs, and past digital footprints. It was real. The account belonged to a former subcontractor with clearance at Tier 4 access, someone who had been inside Operation Ravenwind. And now, they were ready to talk. In a 12-minute video uploaded to an encrypted drop server, then leaked to every platform at once, the whistleblower sat in shadow, voice altered. But the words? They needed no disguise. They told us we were protecting national integrity, but we were building systems to monitor American opinion and shape it. Not against foreign threats, against narratives they couldn't control. I briefed handlers on how to suppress spikes in political sentiment. I watched as metadata from American citizens was rerouted through proxy contractors, scrubbed, then fed into behavioral algorithms. He held up a document, Algorithmic Continuity Phase 3. The same one Kash Patel had flashed on screen 48 hours prior. It wasn't theoretical. It was funded, deployed, and operational. The nation didn't blink. It reeled. Every news network, even those who mocked Kash as a dangerous theorist, aired the video. Ravenwind confirmed we were watched. Delaney Cross went silent. Skycast News removed all archived versions of her interview with Kash. Congress issued a bipartisan emergency inquiry, and Kash, he didn't go on a victory tour. He issued a one-sentence statement. The truth doesn't need applause, just daylight. It wasn't a media stunt this time. It wasn't a talk show. It was a subpoena. The U.S. House Select Committee on Government Accountability called an emergency session, live-streamed coast to coast, packed with media, flanked by protesters and patriots alike. At the witness table sat Kash Patel, no longer introduced as a former staffer or conspiracy theorist. Today, his nameplate simply read, Kash Patel. National Security Council retired, facing him 15 lawmakers, cameras from every major network, a nation holding its breath. Mr. Patel, the chairwoman began, do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Kash didn't hesitate. I've been doing that since the day your networks tried to silence me. The room tensed. Then he opened his binder, labelled Ravenwind, confirmed. For the next 90 minutes, Kash walked them through every data point the whistleblower had verified, contracts signed under veiled authorization codes, behavioral mapping algorithms approved for internal use, congressional offices intentionally left out of briefings. One member of the committee tried to derail the line of questioning. Mr. Patel, do you believe national security justifies withholding sensitive programs from public disclosure? Kash didn't flinch. I believe national integrity requires telling the American people when that security is turned against them. The quote echoed. By hour 2, the room had shifted, not in politics, but posture. Lawmakers no longer argued. They took notes. The most stunning moment came at the end. A young congressman leaned into his mic and asked, Mr. Patel, if you hadn't gone on live television, if they hadn't tried to smear you, would we be sitting here today? Kash exhaled, then delivered the line that would headline every newspaper in America the next morning. No. Because the moment they cut my mic, the country finally started listening. It had been exactly 30 days since the night Kash Patel was cut off on live television. 30 days of leaks, hearings, resignations, and revelations. Now the moment had come. Not in a courtroom, not in a committee chamber, but on his own terms. Kash Patel sat alone on a simple set. No flashy backdrop, no chyron, no panel of experts, just one camera, one desk, one voice. The live feed went up at 8 p.m. EST. By 8:05, 9.4 million people were watching. He didn't waste time. A month ago, I was called a conspiracy theorist. I didn't argue, I didn't insult, I brought the documents. Then they cut the feed. He paused, looked down at the table, where a copy of the Constitution sat next to the flash drive that started it all. Since then, you saw the footage, you heard the whistleblower, you watched Congress confirm it. This wasn't about proving I was right, it was about proving you deserved to know. Then came the moment no one expected. He held up a sealed envelope stamped DOJ Internal. He didn't open it. He didn't need to. This letter confirms an internal investigation has begun. Not into me, into them. Into who ordered the suppression, into who signed the NDAs, into who reactivated Ravenwind, into the silence. Then he stood. No dramatic music, no closing credits, just one final line. 5 words. Simple, permanent. Truth outlives every talking point. And with that, the stream ended. No outro, no applause. Just millions of people thinking. Because they hadn't just watched a man defend himself. They had watched a man undo a lie with nothing but receipts, restraint, and the relentless force of truth.